So, everybody, as promised, here's one from the vault. Here's episode 77 of our audio podcast back before we even had a YouTube channel. This is just a solo recording that I did that got a lot of shares at the time, got a lot of traction at the time, and it's about the distinctions between liberals and leftists. And we've noticed that a lot of people in our comment section and in our chats have sort of taken issue with the fact that in recent episodes, we've sort of lumped leftists and liberals together. And we have insisted that no, we do understand the difference between them. But unfortunately, that difference now is more theoretical than practical because a lot of the so-called leftists from the Bernie Sanders movements have been absorbed into the broader liberal sensibility of the modern mainstream Democratic Party, right? And so we obviously regret that. And so unfortunately, I think a lot of these theoretical differences have not manifested themselves in reality post-Sanders campaign as much as we would like them to have. But we do acknowledge that they exist. And so this is partly put out there in response to people who have commented that we are unfairly lumping liberals and leftists together. I wanted to put this out just to establish that, yes, we do understand the difference. And beyond that, I think it came out pretty good. You know, I recorded this over 2 years ago. This was put out July 18th, 2020. And so it's hard to stand by everything you said 2 years ago, especially in such a volatile climate like this one. So yeah, there are a couple of sentences I may have changed, here and there, listening back to this now. But overall, I think it came out fairly good. And I think there's value in it beyond just as a response to some of the haters on here. All right. So this is audio only. Like I said, this is back before our YouTube days. But I hope you guys enjoy it. I think it came out good, and I hope you think so too. Hello, everyone. Welcome, one and all. This is the Do Dissidents podcast. My name is Keaton Weiss, and I am doing a rare solo recording today. So it's just you and me for the next period of time here. But I decided to do this recording. I had a feeling I would do something like this sooner than later. And it seems to be a good time to have a little talk about the word liberal and the word liberalism. Because lately we on the blog have put out a few pieces whose headlines have used this word, liberal. I myself put out two. One is called Black Lives Matter is Winning and They Don't Need Advice from the Liberal Establishment. And I put out a second one about Medicare for All, title of which, Our Useless Liberal Media Still Won't Commit to Medicare for All. And then we had a great friend of ours, Christopher Helene, from the Alliance Against Democrat Establishment Hypocrisy Facebook group and Facebook page. I'm proud and happy to give him a plug there. He's also the Chalk Bernie to Me artist, who we have interviewed on the show a couple of times. He wrote a great piece that he submitted to us, which, by the way, anybody who wants to submit to our blog, please do so. We are open to submissions from anybody, writers new and established, all right? So I just want to get that out of the way. But he put up a piece on our blog called How Liberals, parentheses, yes, liberals, hijack discourse to undermine the left. And his piece actually tackled the word liberalism kind of in a head-on way. That's why the headline is what it is. Despite that, though, we still had people commenting on all three of those pieces, defending the word liberal. And these were, I guess, leftists, progressives, who still feel some attachment to this word and still feel a need to defend liberals and liberalism as if they have something in common with these liberals. So we had comments saying there is no liberal establishment, or the media isn't liberal, it's corporate. There's no liberal media. There's a corporate media. On Chris's piece, since we had Schumer and Pelosi on our image there, they said Pelosi and Schumer aren't liberals, they're neoliberals, right? Or they're not liberals, they're moderates. Stop calling them liberals, they're not liberals. One guy went as far as to say, you think that, the Democratic establishment are liberal. What are you, high? Right? The point is, these are left-wingers who feel a need to defend the term liberal as if they're actually liberals, as if liberals are left-wing. Liberals are not left-wing. Liberals are not leftists. Okay, and that's what I want to kind of talk through this so that everybody kind of gets a picture of the distinction between a leftist or progressive, right? And we don't have to parse those terms too much. But there is a very big difference between a progressive or a leftist and a liberal. And this is not going to get too wonky in terms of classical definitions, historical examples. We'll do some of that. But we also are going to bring this to modern day and talk about why it is important to actually distinguish between leftists and liberals and what those differences are. All right, so first, we have an example, the most current, the most recent example of someone proclaiming themselves a liberal, who a lot of our leftist followers would say, no, he's not a liberal. He's not a liberal, he's a moderate, or he's a neoliberal. This person I'm talking about is the presumptive Democratic nominee, Joe Biden. Joe Biden calls himself a liberal. And I have two clips of sound that I'm going to play for you that I think will set up what this podcast is going to be about quite well. So I'm going to play the first one here. This is an interview, and the sound on these is a little rough because these are just interviews that, news people sort of chased him down at events, right? He hardly had any formal press conferences throughout the campaign. All right, but here is, I believe, the first or second time that the press actually caught up with him since declaring his candidacy in April. So this is probably late April of 2019. Here's Joe Biden.
I was never labeled as a moderate. If you look at my record with the ACLU, you look at my record with all of the traditional liberal organizations, I have never walked away from. I'm not sure when everybody else came out and said they're for gay marriage. I'm not sure when everyone else came out and talked about a lot of the things I've talked about. The traditional judgments of whether or not you were, quote, a liberal was whether or not what your positions on race were, on women, what your position on LGBT community, what your positions on civil liberties. I'll stack my record on those things against anybody who's ever run, who is running now, or who will run.
All right, so there you have it. He says, look, I'm a liberal because I have good opinions on racial issues, women's issues, and LGBT issues. Now, let's just set aside for purposes of this conversation that his record is actually not that good on any of those issues. Okay, but let's just say that it were. Let's just take that claim at face value. Let me just say that, all right? If you take that claim at face value, and you also listen to him say in that same segment there, that traditionally a liberal is defined by their stances on these types of issues, women's issues, racial issues, LGBT issues, civil liberties issues. And you know what? He's actually right about that. Traditionally, that is how liberalism is defined. Let me just read a sort of standard boilerplate definition of classical liberalism, right? Just very textbook, very boring. This is from Wikipedia, and this is sourced, right? This is not, I did not go in and edit this page. I'm not a Kamala Harris supporter. I don't know if you heard about that, but some of Kamala's K-Hive people, as they're called, the K-Hive, they're going into her Wikipedia page and they're actually editing out bits of her prosecutorial record that liberals, even, never mind leftists, might find a bit upsetting. All right, but anyway, that's not what I did. This is all sourced here, and I'm just using Wikipedia just to keep it super simple for everybody, all right? And don't worry, I will source other things throughout this piece here, all right? Liberalism is a political and moral philosophy based on liberty, consent of the governed, and equality before the law. Liberals espouse a wide array of views depending on their understanding of these principles, but they generally support free markets, free trade, limited government, individual rights, including civil rights and human rights, capitalism, democracy, secularism, gender equality, racial equality, internationalism, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and freedom of religion. So there you have it. That is what classical liberalism is. Notice they are good on all the kinds of issues that Joe Biden said he's good on, but they're also pretty wishy-washy on issues that leftists and progressives care about, such as free trade, free markets, capitalism, and democracy, right? This question of, are democracy and capitalism compatible with each other? That's a question that leftists and liberals have a very, very different answer on. Okay, and I'll get more into this later, but let's just keep this about Joe Biden for right now. What Joe Biden said in that clip there was that, yeah, as liberalism is traditionally defined, I am a liberal. And you know what? He's right. He's right. He is a liberal, according to this definition of liberalism. Absolutely. Now, like I said, we're not going to be wonky and just stick to this very rigid definition of liberalism as it is defined classically, but we will take this once again to another Joe Biden quote, where not only does he embrace being a liberal, but he actually makes this distinction between liberalism and progressivism himself. He makes it explicitly, or as explicitly as someone like Joe Biden could make anything.
I don't yield anybody on my liberal credentials, whether it's on women's issues, on LGBT issues, on
again women, LGBT,
speech, on all those issues. There are very loud voices on the very new progressive side of the agenda, and I think it's useful. I think they're good, they're smart people, and they should be able to be making their case.
Thanks.
But the idea that
nice of you to say.
Somehow the Democratic Party is gone so far to the left that it is not recognized by most Democrats who consider themselves liberal is not factually what's happening.
The fact that the Democratic Party has gone so far to the left that it is not recognizable by those who think of themselves liberal. So there you have it. He's saying exactly what I'm saying here. All right. He's saying that there is a clear distinction between liberals and progressives. Now, the main difference here, as it applies to where we are in our situation now, and the main difference that we on the left have to point out and have to be willing to talk about honestly, is that liberalism is actually very accommodating to capitalism, right? Leftists don't believe that capitalism and democracy can really coexist in a healthy way, right? We think that capitalism is inherently anti-democratic. Liberals don't feel that way. Liberals feel that with some tweaks around the edges, capitalism can sort of be configured in such a way that capitalism and democracy can complement each other. We on the left do not feel that way. We on the left feel that equal political rights, right, cannot exist in a country with drastically unequal property rights and property ownership. This is certainly my opinion, and I think it is pretty well founded, and I think it's a widespread opinion on the left. And this is at odds with even current mainstream liberals, right? The Women's March people are not anti-capitalist. The Women's March people think capitalism can be adjusted, can be reformed, right? Can be, like I said, configured to work within a democratic system. We can look to the founding of the country for answers about how compatible capitalism and democracy actually are. When the country was founded, who were the only people who could vote? Who were the only people with political power when this country was founded? It's a perfect example of the difference between a leftist and a liberal. If you ask the liberal that question, okay, when this country was founded, who are the only people who could vote? Their answer would almost invariably be white men. And it would stop right there. It's that white men were the only people who could vote when this country was founded. And, as is the case most of the time, They are right about that, but they're not telling the whole story. The full answer to that question is who had political rights, who had political power when this country was founded. The answer is white men who owned land. White men with property were the only ones with political power when this country was founded. And the reason for this, James Madison says it, the right of suffrage is a fundamental article in Republican constitutions. The regulation of it is, at the same time, a task of peculiar delicacy. Allow the right to vote exclusively to property owners, and the rights of persons may be oppressed. Extend it equally to all, and the rights of property owners may be overruled by a majority without property. Once again, that's a quote from James Madison about this very issue. So the Founding Fathers understood that capitalism and democracy were at odds with each other. And the Founding Fathers cared more about capitalism than they did about democracy, obviously, because they owned property. And they didn't want the masses who didn't own property overruling them by voting in people who were going to threaten their monopoly on private property. That is a point that you will almost never hear a quote-unquote liberal make, because liberalism does not have that kind of critique of property rights or of capitalism or of the compatibility of democracy and capitalism. They don't go there. Joe Biden does not go there. And so it is completely counterproductive for people on the left to go out of their way to defend liberals who don't have anything in common with them on these more economic dollars and cents issues. And by economic issues, I'm also talking about issues of power. If you don't have a class critique or a class analysis, then you don't have a power analysis. Not really. Not in the way that we need right now, obviously. And so when Joe Biden says, hey, look, man, I'm a liberal because I think all these things, the fact of the matter is he's right. There are a lot of people in the Democratic Party now who, yes, all for women's rights, gay rights, civil rights, freedom of the press. These are all good things. I'm a liberal in that sense. But liberals are also for capitalism. And they think capitalism and democracy are a good fit for each other. They are liberals. Those people who think that way are, in fact, liberals by every definition of the term. You don't have to go that far back in history. You can look to right now. The Democratic nominee right now, he calls himself a liberal. He espouses views that are consistent with traditional liberalism and even more modern liberalism. Therefore, he's a liberal. He walks like a duck. He quacks like a duck. He calls himself a duck. He says, I'm a duck. So guess what? He's a duck. The guy is a liberal. And so is a lot of the more moderate Democratic base. They are absolutely liberals. They are liberals in the sense that they can take good positions on issues that don't cost rich people any money. That is what a modern liberal is. This is the wine track voter. This is the comfy Democratic voter. This is the professional managerial class Democratic voter who wants people to have equal rights. But their definition of equal rights is different from a leftist's definition of equal rights because their whole concept of human rights is fundamentally different from those on the left. I'll make one more sort of wonky historical point here, and then we'll keep this all pretty modern. English philosopher John Locke, right? Considered, one of the sort of philosophical forebearers that the founding fathers sort of drew upon when they were creating our founding documents here, right? His theories of labor, private property ownership, and unlimited wealth were actually directly critiqued a century and a half later by Karl Marx. John Locke is often referred to as the father of liberalism. Okay? This is a guy who believed in people's inherent right to accumulate as much property as possible and said that inequality was inevitable and necessary. Marx obviously disagreed with that. And I'm not saying all leftists have to be devout Marxists, but if you are on the left, you certainly are more sympathetic to Marx's critique of John Locke than you are to the ideas of John Locke as it pertains to property rights, unlimited wealth, and income and wealth inequality. Now, like I said, to sort of keep things more or less modern moving forward, today's liberals would concede, right, that totally free markets, totally free trade, and unfettered capitalism are not totally compatible with individual rights, right? This is how a thing like Obamacare comes to pass, right? Because they say, okay, well, yes, people have a right to health care. Okay, we think health care is a human right. And we understand that you can't call something a human right unless that thing is somehow attainable to the average person, right? You can't send somebody into, a Michael Kors store or a John Varvatos store with a $20 bill and say, here, you have a right to buy any shirt you want off the rack, right? Because there's nothing $20 will get you in either of those stores. So the liberal says, okay, we do actually have to create options and choices, and this is very important, so that people can afford to actually have these individual rights of theirs realized. However, what we are going to do here is we are going to give them choices and options and price points in the marketplace so that they can shop around a commercial for-profit marketplace in order to obtain access to these things that we call individual rights. And so before Obamacare, they would say that really didn't exist, because if you have a pre-existing condition and you go to buy health insurance and a health insurance company says, no, sorry, we don't take people with pre-existing conditions, then you functionally have no right to health care. And so what they say is, okay, let's stop insurance companies, private, for-profit insurance companies, from discriminating against people with pre-existing conditions. Once we do that, we will go a step further and make it easier by setting up these exchanges, right? These state exchanges will make it easier for sort of the working poor who maybe don't get employer-based health insurance. Will make it easier for them to buy cheap insurance plans, once again, through private for-profit insurance companies. That is a liberal solution. Now, you want to call it a neoliberal solution? That is true. Neoliberalism is an economic orthodoxy which works backwards from the premise that the market-based solution is the best solution to every problem. That is what neoliberalism is. But people don't walk around calling themselves neoliberal because that's an insufficient explanation of your politics, because neoliberalism does not address identity issues, right, that we talked about before. So that's why you'll never hear anybody calling themselves a neoliberal. That's why when you say Pelosi's not a liberal, she's a neoliberal, no, you're wrong. She's both. She's both. She is a liberal whose economic views happen to be neoliberal. But liberal politics accommodates neoliberal economic views and integrates them with what we would agree on are fairly good views, right? On civil rights and the like, right? Okay, so a program like Obamacare is a neoliberal program that can be embraced by liberals while still calling themselves liberals. Okay, so this is a very important thing to get straight here. Liberals, not leftists, liberals can reconcile their belief that healthcare is a human right and still oppose Medicare for all. A leftist cannot reconcile those two things, right? A leftist says, no, if we are going to treat healthcare as a human right, then what we need is a single payer system that people are automatically enrolled in, that is free at the point of service and funded by the public treasury. That is how we realize healthcare as a human right. The liberal does not necessarily see it that way. Liberals believe this is really the fundamental difference between liberals and leftists, especially as it relates to an issue like healthcare. Liberals believe in individual rights just as leftists do. The difference is liberals believe that individual rights are facilitated by individual choice. Let me repeat that. They believe that individual rights are facilitated by individual choice. In other words, if we just give people enough options and enough price points to accommodate people of every different class level, then we have done our job guaranteeing healthcare as a right. Why? Because we're giving everyone access to a private healthcare plan. We're giving everyone the opportunity, access, opportunity to affordable healthcare. Do these words sound familiar to you? They should, because if you listen to a Democratic debate, you're going to hear nothing but those buzzwords. We're going to make healthcare affordable and accessible to all, and everybody will have an opportunity to enroll in the healthcare plan that's right for their family. What they mean by that, by the way, when they say you need a healthcare plan that's right for your family, they mean find a healthcare plan that's least likely to destroy your life when you get sick and plunge you into insurmountable medical debt. That's what they mean when they say a healthcare plan that's right for your family. What a crock of shit. Healthcare plan that's right for your family. Here's the healthcare plan that's right for literally every single family. Free at the point of service. Everything is covered, paid for with your taxes. That's a healthcare plan that's right for your family. Find me a family who's going to argue with that. Find me a family who's going to say, no, actually, you know what? The plan that's right for our family, the plan that's right for me and right for my family is the plan where I give up 8% of my salary in premiums, and then I have a $50 copay on a general practitioner visit, a $135 copay on a specialist visit, a $500 copay on an ER visit, and a $15,000 deductible should I ever get in any really bad trouble. That's the right plan for me and my family. It is a load of crap. And leftists know it is a load of crap because leftists understand that there are certain rights that are so basic and so fundamental and so vital that they transcend individual choice. You cannot facilitate them by simply giving people options that may be affordable and right for them and their family. Social Security, right? You don't opt in, you don't opt out. You don't buy in. When you're born, you get a Social Security number, a Social Security card. When you work, dollars come out of your check to fund the program. And then when you reach a certain age and you retire, you get the benefits from that program. Period. There's no choice to be preserved. There's no opportunity to enroll in Social Security. These are very important differences between liberals and leftists. If someone is dying in the middle of the desert and you come upon them, do you open up a cooler and say, look at all these different options I have or all these different drinks, and some are more expensive than others, but I'm sure you could find in this cooler here a drink that's right for you at a price point that you can afford. You know what the dying man is going to say? I need water. I need water, and by the way, I don't have any money. So give me some fucking water. I don't need a million different options at a million different price points. I don't need the opportunity to afford whatever drink you're trying to sell me. I need fucking water. And I need it now. And I can't pay for it. That should be included with my tax dollars. Give me some fucking water. That is the difference between liberalism and leftism. So I'm pretty sure I have illustrated that point about as best I could. There are probably people who could do a much better job of this than me. But I think I've made a decent case for why liberalism is not actually left. Liberalism is a very malleable ideology. Certain leftists are liberals. Most leftists are liberals on freedom of religion, freedom of speech, civil liberties, women's rights, gay rights, civil rights, all that stuff, right? But liberals are not leftists. They are two completely different things. And we're seeing that struggle play out in the Democratic Party right now. And people on the left should not be rushing to defend liberalism as an ideology when they have no reason to believe that people who subscribe to that ideology are their political brethren, because in many cases, they simply are not, as I've illustrated. Now, why do so many on the left feel a need to defend this term? This is kind of an interesting question. I think it actually has a lot to do with the fact that right-wingers have been sort of stigmatizing liberalism for decades, right? Ronald Reagan had quotes about liberalism. When fascism comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism. Most recently, I think, you had the election of 2004 where George Bush and Karl Rove really were successful in making the word liberal this sort of pejorative term, right? I mean, they tried to smear John Kerry with the word liberal. They kept saying John Kerry is the most liberal senator in the country, right? And Kerry said, no, I'm not, right? He ran from that label as fast and far as he could. And by the way, John Kerry kept insisting throughout that campaign that he was opposed to gay marriage, right? The Bush campaign made that election about moral values and fucking gay marriage. Talk about a skilled political operative, how you could start a fucking illegal war that gets hundreds of thousands of people slaughtered, hundreds of thousands of more maimed, hundreds of thousands of more displaced, and you're going to make the election about gay marriage back here at home. But they were able to do that. And they were able to make the word liberal a pejorative term. And I think a lot of people on the left, because they have a sort of defiant spirit that we admire in each other as progressives, as leftists, right? They thought, well, fuck it. If the Republicans are going to call us liberals, yeah, we're going to embrace that. Yeah, we're liberals. Fuck you. Because when the Republicans use the word liberal, they use that to mean that you're a leftist or a communist, right? To a Republican, basically anyone to the left of Mitt Romney is Che Guevara, right? And so when they say liberal, they mean communist, right? They mean radical. They mean revolutionary. Of course, that's complete horseshit, right? But leftists have to be careful not to fall into that trap, right? Because we're actually taking a page from their book. We're actually playing their game right along with them if we concede that liberals are far left, right? The right wing wants liberalism to be synonymous with leftism precisely because they know that liberalism is to the right of leftism. And so if we could demonize liberals as these revolutionary, diehard communist types, then we're never actually going to see a viable left movement in this country, right? Because if we can paint Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, right? If we can paint these people as beyond the pale far left lunatics, then someone like AOC comes along, we're going to be able to flick her off the table like a stink bug, right? They're never going to gain any traction because we're not even going to let the liberals become acceptable in this country. We are going to make sure that even liberalism, even market-friendly liberalism, is out of bounds. And so I know many of our comrades have best intentions when they try to say, no, Nancy Pelosi's not a liberal, she's a neoliberal. We're liberals, we're for the people, right? They called John Kerry a liberal because they're liars. John Kerry wasn't a real liberal, I'm the real liberal. No, John Kerry is a real liberal. You're a leftist. You're a progressive. You're a democratic socialist. You're a socialist. That's why you're for the people, right? You want to give the guy water. You don't want to sell him water. You want to give him water when he's thirsty. Jimmy Dore had a great line because I think it was Hillary Clinton who tweeted out, and there were a bunch of other Democrats who I'm sure tweeted out similar things, that when the pandemic hit, that was around March, right? So that was like after the enrollment period for the Obamacare exchanges closed. And the Democrats' fix was, we need to open up the exchanges, right? Because this employer-based system that we have spent the last year shilling for and spent the last year organizing against the one candidate in the race who is now undeniably right on this issue and has been all along. Even Joy Reid admitted that. Joy Reid, notable Bernie Sanders trasher, said in a recent broadcast that she's been a Medicare for All skeptic in the past, but she can't think of one good reason to maintain this system, right? So these Democrats who were all talking about, oh, we can't take people's health care away from them. What about the 160 million people who get health care through their employer? We can't take that away from them and pass a single payer system, right? Once they realize, oh shit, a crisis has hit, and people are losing their employers and therefore losing their employer-based healthcare plans, their solution was to open back up the Obamacare exchanges. And Jimmy Dore had a great line. He says, their answer for people losing their jobs and their healthcare is, let's sell these people some healthcare. That was a funny line. I mean, think of the stupidity of that. They lost their job and their healthcare, which means not only do they not have healthcare, they don't have the money to afford these Obamacare plans, many of which are quite expensive for middle-class families. Obamacare does help the working poor. It does not do much for middle-class families. Trust me, I looked. I was earning $40,000 a year as a tour manager in Brooklyn, and I was looking on these exchanges, and like the cheapest plan you can get if you're earning like a middle-class $40,000-$50,000 a year salary, it's like $400 a month. Premiums alone, and that's a dog shit plan. If, God forbid, you get in serious trouble and you have to really put that plan to use, you're looking at a deductible of about $15,000 for that price. But hey, that's part of growing up, right? That's what Obama himself said. Obama, the liberal Barack Obama, said, hey, buying health insurance, that's just a part of growing up. Enrolling in Obamacare, that's what you got to do. Part of growing up, that's a rite of passage. It's getting fucked in the ass by a private healthcare insurance company that's probably going to leave you high and dry in your darkest hour when you need them most. He's a liberal. Let him be a liberal. Let them own this discredited ideology that has destroyed this country and this planet. Obviously, it is clear as day that that is what has happened. And, the irony of all this is that this liberal cabal actually has a fairly decent chance of grabbing the reins of power again because of the overt, in-your-face disregard for human well-being being expressed by Donald Trump and this psychopathic Republican Party. Okay? That is the only reason why they have any chance of grabbing power. And if they do, it is very important that if and when Joe Biden becomes president, that we are very clear where we stand. We stand in opposition to the Biden administration. Why? Because they're liberals and we're leftists.
Please clap.